Welcome to Healing Your Family Legacy, here on the Experience of the Soul podcast channel. Innovative, evidence-based recovery that helps to identify intergenerational trauma, allowing for freedom and embracement of the healing process. Today, episode 151, Manage Christmas, Part 2. And now your host, Dr. Donna Bevan-Lee.
This is Dr. Donna Bevan-Lee, Healing Your Family Legacy. Well, it's that time of year. It's right before Christmas. For all of you who are, celebrators of Christmas, I would like to, talk about how to take care of yourself. Again, last time we talked about it, but I want to reiterate some of what I said before, but also bring in some pieces that might be helpful. Because no matter how many times I have given this lecture, and I've given it in person over the years, and, it just, people nod like, oh, yeah, I got to do that. And then they do exactly what they've always done and expect different results, which of course, is unfortunate and painful for people. And so I know that no matter how many times I say, talk about these issues, people need to hear me talk about it some more because they're so deeply rooted in people's lives. When I say, Christmas, most of the time, people think of, family, getting together, Santa Claus, or, Jesus. And, for those of you who are not, celebrators of Christmas, I understand and would suggest that, if you are celebrating Hanukkah, celebrate away. I hope that we can resolve the situation in the Middle East. That would be nice. For those of you who celebrate Kwanzaa, celebrate away. I hope you have a nice time. I don't know very much about that celebration, but I do know something about Christmas, so I'm going to talk about Christmas. So, having been born and raised Mormon, we are a Christian religion, by the way, just in case anybody wonders about that, and believe in Jesus and, all those things. And so I celebrated Christmas from the time I was probably born. I don't remember much about that because I was, way little. And I remember some things about earlier Christmases, but, most of the time when people remember about Christmas, they remember about what it was like when they were at home. And, if you were born and raised Mormon, you probably didn't have parents that were drinking alcohol. Sometimes you were, but most of the time you weren't. I've heard a lot of stories about people whose families, they got together at Christmas and it was a nightmare for them. And yet they go back every year and do the same thing over again. And that's really what I'm talking about today, is that we have expectations around Christmas. We were raised to have expectations around Christmas because of the Santa Claus thing. When you're little, you go see Santa Claus. You write a letter to Santa Claus. People are talking to you about Santa Claus. What do you want Santa Claus to bring you? It's this, delightful myth. I'm not about getting rid of that part of Christmas, but it sets you up as a child to have these expectations where your wildest dreams will be granted. Let's say you live in a big city and you want a pony, chances are pretty good that that won't happen. Or let's say you live, let's say one of your parents are in the military and you want them to come home for Christmas. Chances are that's not going to happen unless they've put in for leave and they've got, seniority or whatever it is that happens there. But, children are set up to have ill-conceived expectations about what Christmas is about. I have friends who were born and raised in religions where they didn't really celebrate anything. And, it was against their rules to celebrate birthdays, Christmas, whatever. It was more or less just, we go and we do the right thing every day, and that's what we do, and we go to church and all that kind of stuff. And, even they're impacted by it because they grew up and, with kids that were celebrating Christmas, that were talking about Santa Claus and what they wanted to get. And so then they feel left out. So, as children, and that's the point here, as children, we're set up to have unrealistic expectations about what happens on the morning of December 25th. And, like I said, if you grew up in a family where there was alcoholism or mental illness or even physical illness, you still had these expectations. It's like, this is the year it's going to be different. Mom and dad are going to do the right thing, and we're all going to have this warm, wonderful celebration where people are opening presents and all that. And it doesn't happen that way for so many people. If you don't have money to get Christmas presents, but let's say your parents go out and, they went out and charged a bunch of things and felt resentful at you when the bills came due and they couldn't pay them. You didn't know about that, but you sensed that something was really wrong and it was, pointed at you. It's like there's no winning in that situation. Children should not be set up with expectations. I've mentioned before that expectations are anyway planned resentment. And so if you're a child and you had these expectations that didn't get met year after year after year, after pretty much the whole world was telling you, you will, if you're a good girl or a good boy, have these expectations. Over time, you get, you feel resentful and angry that, at your parents or at the holiday or, maybe even take it out on Jesus or somebody like that. It's like this is really tough for people. I think I've mentioned that, it's like going back to the scene of the crime, sitting down with people who were, abusive and ignored you, neglected you, whatever. Now you're going to sit down with them and have this lovely, warm family event. It doesn't happen that way. And so, in line with what I've been talking about all this time, about if you grew up in a family that was less than nurturing, and it doesn't need to be physical abuse, in order for it to be abusive, it can be being ignored, it could be, feeling afraid in your family is abusive to children. And we know that it impacts the development of your brain. And so if you grow up in a family where it was less than nurturing to you, it isn't going to feel nurturing to you now as an adult. And the recovery from that means that now you are an adult and you think like an adult. You have realistic expectations like an adult. So if let's say you are in recovery for your childhood trauma and you decide this is the year you want to go home, I'm putting that in air quotes because home is where you live, okay? If you don't live at your parents' house, and some of you might, but if you don't live at your parents' house, then home is where you live. And adults know that when they are going to visit family members for any kind of reason, but we're talking about Christmas now, is that they're going to relatives' home, not their home. Remember, your brain hears everything you say. And if you want to take care of yourself around this holiday, you need to be real with your brain. I'm going to go visit my family. I'm going to go visit my parents. I'm going to go have a celebration with them at their home or at my aunt's home or my brother's home or whose ever home you're going to be at. And it doesn't need to be across the country. It can be down the street. But if you are in your adult reality, you know that any expectations that you have that aren't based in reality is a setup for you to feel angry, resentful, and disappointed. Okay? Disappointment is anger and pain. And expectations are planned resentments. So, getting these ideas out of your brain and knowing that, okay, well, my mother's still an alcoholic and my mother is not, my mother is dead. But, if say you grew up in a family where your mother was an alcoholic and now she's, 65 years old and she's been drinking all this time, so she's not really in good shape. You know that if you go there, that hasn't changed. And that experience of having an alcoholic mother that is not in recovery at Christmas is going to be painful. It's going to be, you might be afraid for her. But you think, okay, so if we're going over to my mother and father's house and my mother is still drinking, then maybe I should do something different about getting dinner together. Unless dad's a chef, of course, which maybe he is. But you might think, well, maybe I'll bring dinner myself. Maybe I'll bring dinner myself, or maybe I'll talk to my siblings or my, whoever else is going to be there, and maybe we can put a dinner together and bring it. Because if we all show up and mother is still in her alcoholism, the chances are pretty good that if there's any dinner at all, it's going to be a disaster. And so I might really like to think that my mother is going to put together this dinner for us at Christmas. But if I'm in my adult reality and I know about alcoholism and I've seen her in other times be impaired and really impaired at Christmas, I'll know that that is an expectation that will lead to pain, anger, disappointment, and I'll walk away and feel like, oh, yet another year where Christmas was ruined by mother because she was drinking all day long and didn't fix dinner or fixed dinner and it was burnt. So this is the difference between showing up at a family event at Christmas time and being in your wounded child reality, in your adapted adult child reality, and being in your adult reality. If you have your adult reality on board, you look at the facts. You don't let your wounded child be the one making decisions about how you're going to celebrate this particular holiday. And, even if, parents or wherever you're going say, well, we know this year it's going to be different. Mom's not going to be drinking. It's like you ask the question, is she in recovery? Because if she's older and not in recovery for her alcoholism, then you know that it's not going to be different. Her alcoholism is a year older, so that's not going to be good. And who knows what else is going on. So you have to keep your adult self on board and make decisions based on facts and based on what's going on in your brain, not on what's going on with your wounded child or your adapted adult child, which would be hoping beyond hope that those expectations that you were brought up with that never got met in the first place, somehow they're going to be met. No, they're not. And so, looking at the realities and having realistic expectations will help you to have what I call boundaries around this holiday. And just to, talk about what a boundary looks like in this situation would be, I'm an adult. I no longer am relying on those people to meet my needs. I make sure I get my needs met by people who are in my life, that care about me, that are willing and able to meet my needs. So I'm going there because they're my family of origin. That's all. And I'd like to see them. And even if you are going for what I call guilt prevention, that's fine. You might be going for guilt prevention. What I mean by that is that your parents, might be getting quite older. They might be suffering from illnesses. And you might think, well, if they don't make it for another year, I don't want to be feeling guilty because I didn't go see them. Or maybe it's just that I'd like to see them before they die. And that's fine. Those are realistic expectations and realistic reasons. See, when you're an adult, the fantasy is taken out of the equation. And it doesn't mean that it's no fun. It can be a lot of fun. But you have to take the fantasy out of it, because if you don't, you won't have boundaries. You'll walk into a situation that's been painful and filled with disappointment and pain your whole life. And now it's even greater because you had those expectations that, once again, were not met. So if you say, okay, I can go, I can look at lights, I can, visit with family members, I can visit with people that, maybe mean something to me besides my family members. I mean, if it's where I grew up, there's probably a lot of options there. And I'll make sure that I'm taken care of. Now, one of the ways that I strongly suggest people take care of themselves around these holiday times is, if you're going to be away from your home, make sure that you are staying somewhere safe, somewhere that you can go to if things get a little too crazy, because they have a tendency to do that. And one option would be to get a hotel or, and stay at an inn, or get a bed and breakfast or something that is away from all of that, all of your family of origin. Because if you've had childhood trauma, you want to be able to take care of yourself in the event that things start getting crazy again, because they always do. I mean, sometimes it's worse than others, but it's not that, oh, happy, warm family Norman Rockwell. For those of you who don't know who he is, look him up. The Norman Rockwell kind of Christmas is not realistic. Even if you weren't born into a family where you were not abused, abandoned, or neglected, you probably don't have that Norman Rockwell kind of thing at Christmas. So just have a place to stay where you can be away and get yourself nourished in a way that would let you go back and say, okay, that's called a boundary. Boundaries are, sometimes the best boundary is distance. And so you might say, well, I'll go visit, but I'll stay in a hotel that's, anywhere else other than that there. It's like stay in a hotel that's downtown, or stay in a hotel that's, down the road, or get a Airbnb. There are a lot of options. And that's one thing. Another thing is to make sure that you have your own transportation. You don't want to be stuck because you can't get out. You don't want to be stuck in a situation, even if you've got another place to stay, where you can't get there because you don't have transportation. So, if you live near a bus line, that'd be fine, or live near a subway or whatever. But most people will either need to drive to that place or rent a car, or, sometimes there might be an extra car. Make sure if there is an extra car that you've been allowed to use, make sure you have the keys, and don't get upset if they start, getting weird because you've got the car. You need to get away. Now, that's called a boundary. And you can go right back, if you've gone to someone else's house that's not in your town or your city, that's how you take care of yourself. And when you have boundaries, it means that you are self-contained. That means that, if they say, well, why don't you stay here? We've got plenty of room. And that would be a disaster in your adult mind. Know that could really be a problem. It might not be, but do I want to take that chance that, I'll do that, but then I'll spend the next 3 months in therapy, or the next 6 months in therapy, or have to double up on my groups or whatever. Like, I might just say, when you have a boundary, it's about self-containment. And self-containment means that in my adult reality, I'm going to decide in my adult brain what I'm going to say and what I'm going to do. So you can stay here, we have lots of space. Well, I think that would be, thank you for the offer, but we already decided to stay over here, and we really appreciate it, though. You are not required to explain, justify, or rationalize your adult decisions. And when you do, it usually makes you end up into a hole. Okay. Well, we thought it would be better because we didn't know how many people. Well, come on. Oh, it's like there's enough room for everybody. If you just say, oh, well, we've made plans to stay here. Thank you very much for the invitation. That pretty much closes it. And if they're drinking or, being like, oh, no, you must not like us very much. It's like, that's not about you, remember? It's about them and their issues. And you can always just say, well, I really appreciate your invitation, but we already made these plans, and that's what we're going to do. Now, most people will probably be glad that you're not staying in their house, because they might want to have, they might be, wanting to drink the rest of the night, or maybe they have other things that they'd rather be doing. And, who cares what their deal is, right? That's not your business. Your business is to take care of yourself. And, for those of you who are in recovery and have 12-step group involvement, any place you go, anywhere on this planet, there will be meetings. There will be AA, probably NA, most likely Al-Anon. If there's an AA, there's an Al-Anon. And, guess what? They're online too. And if you need to have immediate support for what's happening, that's always a good option. It's just sitting out there. It's free. It's waiting. And all you have to do is go or sign on. But taking care of yourself at the holidays is really, really important. Of course, people tend to overeat and they drink too much and all those things, but you don't have to do that. If you overeat a little bit, okay, that's manageable. You're probably not going to end up in jail about that. But don't drink too much. Or if you're going to do it, please have a designated driver or some way to get home so you don't end up in jail or worse, the hospital. Basic, get a little exercise. It's okay if you go walk around the block after dinner. And even if it's snowing, go walk around the block anyway. Or put things on your feet so that they claw the snow if it's snowing or icy. Or just do some jumping jacks. Taking care of yourself is a year-round experience. And it can be very disappointing when you spend all year taking care of yourself and then you blow it up in 1 month or less and have to start over again. It's all right to overindulge at holidays. People do it anyway. But you don't have to go overboard, and you can still take care of yourself. Well, Merry Christmas, and we'll talk next time about New Year's.
Thank you for listening to Healing Your Family Legacy here on the Experience of the Soul podcast channel. This channel is made possible because of listeners just like you. If you would like to support the channel with your tax-deductible contribution on an ongoing basis or through a one-time gift, head over to experienceofthesoul.com/support. Healing Your Family Legacy is copyright 2023, Dr. Donna Bevan-Lee, all rights reserved. Our theme music is composed by Dave Croft and used with permission. The Experience of the Soul podcast channel is a production of 818 Studios.
Hey friends, Sean here, your Experience of the Soul producer. I want to take a moment to tell you about something truly exciting. The SoulWorks online community, created by your host, Cynthia Alice Anderson, and available on the Mighty Networks app. If you're looking for a place where you can explore your spiritual path, connect with others, and grow in a meaningful way, then this is for you. SoulWorks is so much more than an online community. It's a safe, inclusive space for spiritual exploration, self-discovery, and personal transformation. Inside the community, you'll find everything from uplifting spiritual studies to soul-centered growth practices, meditations, affirmations, and so much more. It's a space where you'll always be supported and never judged. The best part, membership is free. You'll have access to powerful resources, inspiring content, and a supportive group of like-minded people who are all on their own unique spiritual journeys. And if you're ready to dive deeper, there are premium options available to enhance your experience with a live Monday night talk series and extended, deeper meditations. If you're seeking a place to connect, grow, and nurture your soul, we would love to have you join us in the SoulWorks community and see where this journey can take you. Visit my.soulworkscommunity.com today.